Alright, so for this project, I wanted to talk a little bit more about Easter Island. Since I know a good bit about Easter Island, it's always really fascinated me, and this gives me a pretty good opportunity to talk about it. So, Easter Island has this very isolated island in the Pacific Ocean, over 2,000 miles from the nearest shoreline. And it's covered in over 100 of these massive stone heads, 12, 16 feet tall, thousands of pounds of just solid rock, and we don't know how they got there. The nearest we can measure is the earliest settlers came around, well, historians disagree, between like 4 and 700 AD, like 13, 1500 years ago. And we believe that they came a lot of Filipino descent. And now the history of this island is heavily debated. We can see like evidence of like a lot of civil wars and a lot of general destruction. Statues broken, obsidian spear points have been found, and most of these claims are right around the 1600s is when that stopped. Now in the early 1700s, that's when the first settlers arrived. It's around early 1720s, give or take, and they were Dutch. Now these Dutch gave it its name. They named it Easter Island to commemorate the day that they arrived on the island. They got there on Easter. And now natives were around like 3,000 ish when they got there. Now, just a few years later, there seemed to have been a civil war when the Dutch left and came back because there was less than 1,000 left. Now, this was a very heavy toll. So the Dutch seemed to have a nice relationship with the locals. It wasn't until a few years later that the French and then eventually the Spanish got there. And it was just a mess because the Spanish colonization tactics were very, very brutal by most standards. But such was the deal back then. Now, it wasn't until the later 1800s that Chile eventually annexed the island, and all the people there, they all became Chileans. But they didn't officially gain citizenship until the later 1960s. That was when the residents, the natives, became official Chilean citizens. Now, because of the colonization, they had a very mixed population. A lot of these Polynesian descended locals, a lot of the Spanish, French, Dutch. They had a very, very mixed population, and that led to a good bit of like a melting pot concept, similar to America now. But today, the population's right around the low 3,000s. So it's been pretty constant there. It's not been too big because the island is very small. It can't hold a lot of people. But for the most part, it's just an interesting place. It's amazing to visit. I hope to make it there just to see this archaeological phenomena.